Over 4 decades ago, Nintendo's first home video game console, the Nintendo Entertainment System, was released in the United States. Launching right after the infamous video game crash of 1983, the console started the resurrection of the video game industry in the West, and today is seen as one of the most impactful video game consoles ever released. But even with such a legacy, there's a collection of people who never got to experience playing the NES. Take, for example, Nintendo's own Koichi Hayashida. So what do you do when you never got to play early Nintendo games growing up and work as a game developer for Nintendo? Simple. You develop a way to play the games at work. And it was this opportunity Hayashida had that led to a new series on the Wii U that turned classic NES games into minigame-like challenges. NES Remix. In this episode of Cartridges and Consoles, we'll look at the 2 main titles from this series that challenge your skill in classic NES games, and show how these games' concept was an interesting and fun idea, but how some noticeable oversights can bring down the experience significantly. NES Remix was developed by Nintendo's EAD Tokyo department alongside Indie Zero and first released for the Wii U's Nintendo eShop on December 18, 2013, in commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the original Nintendo Famicom in Japan.
They grow up so fast.
Meanwhile, the game's sequel, NES Remix 2, released on April 25, 2014, as a celebration of the 5-month anniversary of NES Remix.
I don't have any candles for 5 months, so this'll have to do.
There also was a physical edition released containing both games called the NES Remix Pack and a 3DS version of the game titled Ultimate NES Remix. But for the purposes of this video, I will only be covering the 2 Wii U titles in the series. The series mainly revolves around completing quick mini-game-like challenges in a selection of games from the Nintendo Entertainment System. 16 games in NES Remix 1 and 12 in NES Remix 2. Your goal is to complete these challenges as fast as possible to earn a star rank for each one, and if you're really fast enough, you can earn the elusive Rainbow Star rank. Alongside standard challenges for each game, you also have a challenge category known as Remix, which takes these pre-existing NES games and flips them on their heads to create innovative new challenges. From something simple as playing Super Mario Bros. In mirror mode, or Excite Bike with only your headlights, to playing as Link in Donkey Kong or defeating Kirby enemies as Toad. These remix challenges change up all you do about NES games and can really throw you for a loop. Completing these challenges earns you bits, which will unlock stamps that you can use to post to Miiverse. When it existed. In addition, NES Remix 2 also had extra modes, such as Super Luigi Bros., which is the entirety of Super Mario Bros. In mirror mode, and Championship Mode, which is a recreation of the games and challenges from the 1990 Nintendo World Championships. Now, both NES Remix games have some strong positives about them, with the main one being their general structure. For one, presenting all these classic NES games as minigame challenges is a pretty neat concept on its own. Not only is it an easy way for people who never played NES games to learn all the gimmicks around each game featured, but it also allows for the game to be more focused on short gaming sessions over the more elongated sessions these games encouraged back then. For example, if you never played Super Mario Bros. But don't want to trudge through the full game, NES Remix has 23 stages focused on the game that teach you the basics. Same goes for The Legend of Zelda, Donkey Kong, Excite Bike, Kirby's Adventure, and any other game covered in both NES Remix titles. The games also run on very accurate emulations of the NES hardware, meaning all of these stages and minigames feel like the actual NES games they're based on. And this was an intentional design decision made by Koichi Hayashida, solely based off his belief of making the games feel like the original NES, no matter how dated the graphics may be, or how bad the controls for Ice Climbers are. This makes it so both NES Remix titles truly bring you the closest they ever could to the original NES games without playing them on original hardware, and makes the game truly stand out from other attempts at resurrecting classic games. But if you're the kind of person who wants a different take on the classics, the remix challenges are also a very welcome treat. Because these stages alter all of the games in different ways, it can provide an extra level of challenge for any player. I've already mentioned some of them, like playing a level from Donkey Kong as Link from The Legend of Zelda, which means you can't jump, but there's another Donkey Kong Remix challenge where springs fall from the sky, a Super Mario Bros. Remix challenge where the floor is ice, a Dr. Mario Remix challenge where your pills become grayscale, and even a Kirby's Adventure Remix challenge where you have to finish the level without getting hit, but can't exhale. These remix challenges take over most of these games, with over 100 of them combined between NES Remix 1 and 2, which shows just how many clever ideas they had when designing these remix variation and how it's easily the main gimmick that you'll get dragged into. However, there are a couple of problems I have with both NES Remix games. The first revolves around the remix challenges I just mentioned. Well, yes, I did just give them their flowers. Not every remix challenge is a slam dunk, as some of them are more lazy and half-assed than others. For instance, the main gimmick around 6 challenges in NES Remix 1 is just the game is in a silhouette, and there's 3 remix challenges almost back-to-back involving you play as Luigi on a mirrored stage of either Donkey Kong or Super Mario Bros. While I get that more unique ideas can be harder to come up with after a while, you can't help but feel they missed the mark on some of these remix challenges compared to others. Another big complaint I have is related to the game's scoring system and UI. As I've mentioned earlier, depending on how fast you beat a stage, you'll get a star ranking for that stage. However, there is one caveat to this. If you at any time get a game over and use a continue on a stage with multiple minigames, you are automatically reduced to, at most, a 1-star rating. Now, I understand why this is the case, as using a continue has you restart on the minigame you got a game over in. But what makes it more annoying is that when you get a game over, there's no option to reset the stage entirely. You are forced to either continue from the stage you died on and get 1 star, or go back to the selection screen and reselect the stage. No in between. This is probably the biggest UI flaw across both NES Remix games, and it's a huge oversight that definitely puts a damper on the experience. I also will say that the bits and stamps are a very poor type of collectible to work towards in this game. While I get Miiverse was at its peak when the game released, it still feels kind of awkward choice for a goal to work towards outside of the obvious star rankings for each stage and game. As for my biggest gripe with both NES Remix entries,
Other than the difficulty, which I'm chalking up to a pure skill issue. Who keeps changing my script?
the choice of the NES games featured is somewhat awkward. While yes, Nintendo is known for its platformers, and there's a multitude of those types of games featured, there's also a lot of other choices I think they could have done without. For one, the only 2 sports games with dedicated categories across both NES Remix games are Golf and NES Open Tournament Golf, which seems very unnecessary. You also have weird anomalies getting stages and minigames, like Donkey Kong 3, which was a commercial failure in the West, and Wario's Woods, which was the last first-party game on the NES and released 3 years after the Super Nintendo hit the US market. Now, I understand that you can't have any random NES game added here, as Nintendo has to have some say in its development. But there's still several games that could have been better fits that Nintendo was involved in. Take, for example, Tetris and Devil World, both developed by Nintendo. Square's Rad Racer, which was a part of the original NES World Championships in 1990. Game Freak's Yoshi, Rare's Anticipation, Intelligent System Soccer, the list goes on and on. It also doesn't help that some of these NES games have barely any stages or representation. Of the 28 NES games featured across both games, 5 are only featured in a special bonus category and have anywhere from 1 to 4 stages each. What's more, Pinball and Dr. Mario are tied for the least amount of stages for a dedicated title, with 6 stages each. While I appreciate including these games and paying homage to the console's history, you gotta come up with something to drag people in if you're gonna feature them over more well-acclaimed titles you could have included instead. And you can't make the argument that the games had to be developed by Nintendo and released worldwide. Kirby's Adventure is a HAL Laboratory game, and the two versions of Super Mario Bros. 2 were region-specific until the SNES and Super Mario All-Stars. So really, there's no stopping a game like NES Tetris or Devil World from being added instead of golf. Unless you really think two golf games are better somehow. Overall, the two main games of the NES Remix series were a novel concept at the time, but were also games that were severely limited by some pretty questionable choices across the board. The bit-sized minigame challenges running on the closest thing to authentic NES hardware truly helped bring you back to 1985, while the Remix minigames threw every curveball into said original experience and helped make the games more enjoyable. However, some of those curveballs the Remix minigames present can be somewhat underwhelming, and when those are combined with a semi-flawed ranking system and UI, poor rewards that you can't even properly use anymore, and a somewhat odd selection of NES games that don't fully define the console's legacy, it truly makes these games feel more lackluster than they should be. While these are still good games if you want to relive the classics of the NES, or are looking for a new type of challenge around the games you grew up with, it's definitely not a huge standout when we look back at it today. Good for fulfilling Hayashida's wish of wanting to play the games he never got to growing up, but isn't really notable outside of that. NES Remix 1 and 2 on the Wii U get my personal combined rating of 5 cartridges out of 10.